All right, there are three things I would like to do in this presentation. One, I would like to start with laying some foundations about creative thinking, and that's what I call the fundamentals. The second element, which will be the core, is to talk about how do we apply this in the context of research? And finally, how can you begin your own practice to become more creative in your thinking when it comes to the research agenda? So let's start. I always like to, when I do lectures, I always like to be sure that I'm able to carry everybody along by creating a platform to engage everyone. So if some of these sound very pedestrian to you because you are familiar, please forgive me. Now some might not be. So when we talk about creative thinking, to start with, what are we talking about? One of the best definitions I've found in the literature come from the Australian Department of Education Research, and the Australian Centre for Education Research, ASA, and it defines this topic, creative thinking, as the capacity to generate many different kinds of ideas, manipulate ideas in unusual ways, and make unconventional connections in order to outline novel possibilities that have given the potential to elegantly meet a given purpose. Believe me, I can spend the next 30 minutes, which is the time I have, to unbundle this definition, but that kind of time is not available to us. But let me point your attention to a few things. Number one, that when we think around creative thinking, it starts with the ability to generate ideas. And as we hear me say as I go, it doesn't mean the idea must be nice ideas. It doesn't mean they must be perfect ideas. In fact, they can be crazy ideas or what sound to others like stupid. But it starts with generating ideas. Secondly, is the ability to connect the ideas in such a way that can create a unique picture from what others may not even be able to see. And ultimately, is to bring novel possibilities to address an issue so that there can be that answer to a problem that has been identified. Of course, you can define it in simpler ways and less academic way. And that's one of that kind of definition you have here, which says creative thinking is all about developing innovative solutions to problems. Innovative solutions do not mean solutions that never existed. No. It might just be how you, to use the word used by the ASA, how you manipulated that solution, what is known, how do you create the unknown from it? So it's about developing innovative solutions to problems. One of my favorite books, I hope some people on this bit will have read the book, Outlier, by Malcolm Gladwell. Malcolm Gladwell is a very interesting writer. I mean, you know, many of you might know some of his work, The Tipping Point, David and Goliath, and so on and so forth. In Outliers, he tried to talk about the story of successful people. In fact, he tried to show that becoming successful is something that is possible for everybody, and that it is not like something that people are just born with as geniuses. And it showed that virtually everybody will become great. Somebody is tampering with my screen. We could become great success by just doing a couple of things. But this is one of the great stories that come from the work in this book. One of the things he said is that think about any of the great people you know, the artists, the painters, you know, and you probably might know one great work that they've done or two great works, but that it showed clearly that for any of them, they probably had produced thousands and thousands and thousands of those works that we never know of, the songs that we never heard of. And one of the ideas that came strongly from the book Outlier is that for anyone who wants to be successful, you must produce ideas in large quantum. In fact, the larger the number of ideas you are able to produce, the more diverse they are, the more likely that you become successful. And so one of the things creative thinkers do is that they chunk ideas out repeatedly. And that's one of the ways I would like to summarize this is that creative thinkers brainstorm not only a large number of ideas, but also a variety and range of them. In fact, Malcolm Gladwell made a very interesting proposition, which was based on the work done by some three researchers many years back. Where he was saying that for anyone to be competent in anything he's doing, he needs to have like 10,000 hours of practice. And so, think about those two elements I've just told you about. One, the number of hours that are expended or invested in generating ideas. Two, the quantum of the ideas, the variety and the ranges. And those combinations are things that ultimately result in the best known people we know, the best known painters in the world, the best known singers in the world, and so on and so forth. To be a creative thinker means that we must encourage ourselves to start with brainstorming on a large number of ideas and different varieties of ideas. And these are some of the characteristics that might interest you. But maybe I should point your attention to this little thing I wrote in tiny words on the right. That when you think about creative thinking, when you're talking about creative thinking, you're talking about imaginative action, fashion, so as to produce outcomes which are both innovative and of value. You know, one of the things that happens in the process of creative thinking is that beyond the generation of ideas must be the creative, what they call the creative flexibility, which is where the range comes from. But there must also be the idea selection process, because not all ideas will make sense. To give you a very simple example, if a man has very bad headache, terrible headache, migraine that is or more or less crippling his life, there are many solutions. Of course, if you cut off the head of the man, the headache will stop. But like Yorubas would say, cut off his head is not the solution to the problem, because you kill him. So ideas are not just about filling up large number of ideas. You must also be able to process, connect, and select ideas such that we can move meaningfully from idea generation to idea implementation and to innovation. But these are some of the characteristics that you think about creative thinkers. One, flexibility. There are people that are willing to think out of the box. Some people will say they think without box, because they are flexible in their mind. They are willing to consider things from different ideas, from different areas, from different angles. They're not bound by the fact that, somebody might embarrass me because this is not normal thinking. No, flexibility is a core characteristic in creative thinking. Secondly, is authenticity. The thought that is being provided or the idea that has been created must be such that you can feel its practical purposes. There can be an ownership of that idea, and that idea relates to the problem such that it can solve the problem. One of the other characteristics is multiple thinking. Multiple thinking talks about going beyond your normal realm. For example, for many of us who are in the medical field, one of our limitations, as I was sharing with a PhD class yesterday in clinical science, that one of our limitations is we think within the limit of our clinical experiences. We think we want to do our research with clinical experiences. But if you bring social sciences discipline or perspective, if you bring molecular biology dimension, that's one of the ways you are beginning to think in multiple thinking. You are looking at different dimensions to apply to the same situation to generate answers to a problem. One other idea, when you talk about creative thinking, is wandering. And wandering here means free thinking. Just allowing your ideas, your mind to just roam as widely as it can. Just give it a free rein to just imagine the best and the worst possible. And this comes out particularly when you look at your children. You know, children have all kind of creative things they do. But as we grow up, because particularly in our society, there's a tendency to say, oh, you can't do that, oh, you can't do that. And we begin to close in on ideas. But if you want to be creative thinkers, you must allow our mind to be able to roam freely, to be able to explore things in different dimensions, so that you can then come up with the best ideas that solve the situation. You must also learn to think fast and independently. Too many times, when you talk to students, PhD class, and you say, what do you want to do? they're asking you, sir, what idea do you have for me? No, if you're going to be a creative thinker, you must learn to think independently. Creative thinking also means that you are open to criticism. You don't see criticism as holding you back. You don't see it as somebody not liking you. It's because it is that process that helps you to refine your ideas, to move from the idea generation to the idea of selection process. It's also about rationalism. There is a touch of reality to what is being done. And it also means that you are suspicious. You are not taken in by anything. Somebody says it's not possible. One of my favorite prime minister, the founding prime minister of Israel, says that if one scientist tells you it's not possible, he said, go and get another group of scientists. You are suspicious. Someone says it's not possible. You are suspicious of that person. People will say this is the only way. You are suspicious. No, that can't be the only way. There are several other ways. And it also means that you are pushing the boundary to come up with different solutions. These are some of the characteristics of creative thinking. And how do we get to that realm of creative thinking? What are some of the approaches that can be involved? I needed to make a number of them in my characteristics, but let me also just throw them up in a way that you might be able to relate it very fast. One is about looking for many solutions rather than one. Is that idea about, look, there must be other ways to think to handle this problem, not just one way. It also means that you are willing to allow yourself the freedom to think widely, even as you think sensibly. Okay? You are willing to treat all ideas as if they contain something reasonable. You are not judging ideas too early. You are not just discarding, oh, this can't be possible. No. You are really willing to learn. You are willing to listen. You are willing to consider. You are willing to give out the options a possibility. One of my favorite books is The Startup Nation. It's the story. I hope that's the one I want to talk about. I think that's the one. There are two favorite books I like to talk about Israelis and how Israeli beat up his economy. In one of the, no, I think it is a different one. I'll remember the title. It's a story about, many of us may know the real life story. It has been made to a film. The kidnapping of Israelis that they then took them in a plane, took them to Uganda and Entebbe, and they kept them at the airport, and they said, oh, if anybody approaches, they will blow them up. In one of the very interesting episodes of how Israel came to go and launch an attack, the defense minister got together a group of crazy young guys in the army, and he said, how do we fly from Jerusalem? No, how do we fly from Israel to Uganda in a way that nobody will know? How do we enter the airport in a way that everybody will think we are some other people? And how do we get these people out alive? And so some of you have watched that film. What looked like an impossibility became impossible because they were willing to consider crazy ideas. I'm struggling to remember the title of the book. That's how I keep on pausing. If I remember, it's something about not Dreams Don't Die. It was written by one of their former prime minister. But the idea I want to give you is that they were willing to consider the widest of ideas. That's how they came up with the most creative idea that got people delivered from all Israel to Uganda and picked people and took them out, and they lost only 2 people. So if you want to be creative thinkers, you must be willing not to discard ideas too early. You must allow ourselves to do. Taking pen, I like to do that a lot. Draw, as I just think and write to draw, just imagine things that can free your mind. This that can give your mind that air of creativity. Feel free to daydream, play with theory, play with suggestions, and you must allow yourself the freedom to make mistakes. And very important, you must have a learning mindset to learn from what worked and what did not work. One of the things I used to comfort myself when I work with the idea that did not work is that I tell myself I have only paid school fees. That when you go to school, you have to pay school fees. And if I tried something, it didn't work, and it cost me something, a great price. I just said myself, I've just gone to school, I've just learned. Well, at least I've learned something out of it. So learning mindset is important if you are going to be creative thinkers. And one of the frameworks around developing capacity in thinking is the framework by Asa. I talk about 3 dimensions. One is one of the things I've been talking about since we started: idea generation. Free your mind, allow wandering, allowing your ideas to just flow and things like that. But there's also the dimension of experimentation. This is where the issue of allowing yourself to make mistakes, be willing to risk it, comes in. And ultimately, it's about synthesizing those ideas and such that you are able to get the quality idea out of it. So it's not just idea, but ultimately you are getting quality ideas that provide solutions to what you are thinking. 2 things that I'd like to encourage all of us with is that creative thinking and creativity can be taught. Malcolm Gladwell says that nobody is born a genius, that every genius develops along the way. 2 quotations. One says creative thinking underpins creative output. Creative thinking strategies can be taught, and it is possible to focus on creative thinking as a key element in the task. The other one says creativity is a mental phenomenon that results from the application of ordinary cognitive processes, such as working memory. We see things, we store them in our memory, and the ability to categorize, to manipulate, to say, oh, this looks like rectangle, that's another rectangle. If I put those 2 rectangles together, what are they for? And to manipulate those objects in our mind. Importantly, the ability to think creatively can be taught and developed. Creativity is not a fixed inborn trait. If you forget everything I'm saying today, please don't forget that creativity is not a fixed inborn trait. You and I can ascend, we can grow in our ability to think creatively. And I like this. One of the works I was reading, Rita and Todd did a work where they were looking at how you can foster creative thinking. In fact, this was on the university. How you can grow creative thinking in among undergraduates. And they talk about 6 things that I think is important for all of us to understand. 1, they talk about understanding the question. What does that mean? Now, when you see a problem, you want to examine its dimensions, break them down, so that you can understand really where is the root of this issue, and you can begin to deal with it. And they then talk about convergent thinking. Convergent thinking is the logical thinking. 1 + 1 is equal to 2. That's convergent thinking. 2 + 1 is equal to 3. But divergent thinking is the ability to be able to look at that to think about an issue in a more diverse way, not in an indirect way. Let me give you 2 examples, or maybe 1 example because of time. If a teacher says to students, 3 + 3, the answer is 6, right? That's convergent thinking. But if a teacher says to students, what are the ways you can get 6? It can be 6 multiplied by 1. It can be 12 divided by 2. It can be 24 divided by 4. That's divergent thinking. You create a situation where people can then think about, different ways of looking at it. In fact, you can then even ask them further to say, look, what can you do with 6? And somebody can say, 6 is half a dozen. If I go to the market and I want to buy half a dozen material, I can negotiate downwards. Somebody can say, if I put 6 hexagons together or 6 triangles together, it will form this. And that's how we begin to get to the realm of divergent thinking. So don't always try to go the logical, the simple way. But divergent thinking means you are looking at this from different angles. This work I want to do, this research I want to get an answer to. Yes, I know that people have got the answer this way. Are there other ways? So thinking about the answer, where you're going, and then asking backward, what are the various ways? It's like going to the market. There are several ways that can go to the market, and that's what divergent thinking I talk about. Detached thinking talks about a deliberate thought where you are not bound, you are not emotional about the thought. You allow yourself to be detached so that you can have the freedom to question yourself and to re-examine yourself. Sometimes we get emotionally attached to our solution. A couple of weeks back, I was discussing with a group. We were talking about creating a unit in a space, moving what we have there out and moving another thing. And somebody said, oh, when we mentioned this, somebody was crying about us using the space for something. And I'm like, why are you crying? It's like, we are the one that arranged the place, we had our idea. Like, so that's sometimes how we stop ourselves from thinking in a more creative way. So the type thinking is you are deliberate about it, separating yourself emotionally so that you can turn it up, you can turn it down, you can look for new ways. And very interesting, the last 2 points is about when you are thinking about an issue, you have an issue at your hand. One of the things to do when you are looking for solution and it doesn't seem to come, to stop thinking about the problem, is to take a break, go and play football, go to a party with your friends, go and gist, go do some other things. The reality is this: our mind works subconsciously on issues. And when you allow your mind to have that freedom and that space from being cluttered, from thinking and struggling, one of the things that you do is that you unconsciously allow your mind to wander more, to search for more solutions. So leave your work, take a break, go around, think about it, talk to people, just do all that, and then come back later. It might be this. And that's one of the reasons why I put this picture. Many of us might probably recognize what I'm trying to say here. This is actually from an Israeli museum. It is the story of Archimedes and the Eureka moment. I'm sure you remember that story. When he was asked by the king of Syracuse to say he wants him to detect if the goldsmith that he gave gold to had used the exact amount of gold in making the crown or the dish. No, Archimedes thought about that issue. After a while, he couldn't get a solution. He just left it. But his mind continued to work on it. And one day, he entered the battle and water splashed down. I realized that, the water that splashed down must be equivalent to the weight of his weight. And the story said he jumped out of the battle, totally forgetting that he was naked, running through the streets, and shouting, Eureka, Eureka, I found the answer. He simply allowed his mind to work. And one important area, sleep. When you think about an issue, particularly towards the end of the day, when you allow yourself to think about it freely and you go to bed, one of the things you set free is the ability of your mind to continue to work on it subconsciously, even when you are sleeping. So sleeping is important. Don't derive yourself of sleep so that you think you find a solution. No, you can set your mind to work through the night in a more rested way, even while you are sleeping. I wish you read this paper. It was this paper found using this method. They found some very interesting things about how students are able to improve in their creative thinking. All right, I want to drop this in before I go to the second dimension. Somebody might ask me, you talk about creative thinking, but there's also critical thinking. Somebody can even say, Jimmy, you talked about critical thinking last time. Now today you're talking about creative thinking. Really, they are different, but they are highly interconnected. And particularly in research arena, we need both of them and use them symbiotically. Critical thinking talks about our objective analysis and evaluation of an issue in order to form a judgment, a right judgment, a judgment that is well thought out, a judgment where you are not just going by opinions, but you subject it to test and rigor. Whereas creative thinking involves just letting your imagination run wild, bringing original ideas to create something. Like Simon Aitoh said, critical and creative side of the thinking process are essential if you are to accomplish the goal central to scholarly research, which is to make original contribution. That takes me to my second part, the research dimension and the application of creative thinking. I don't want to bore you with definition of research because I'm sure you know what it is. But let me just remind us, I particularly like this definition from the Department of Education, because if we really get a good grasp of some fundamental, like even what research means, the level and the type of research we're doing will change. Because half of the time they are doing research so that we can publish papers, and oftentimes in a journal that nobody reads. But let me therefore read this to you. That research is a systematic investigation into and study of material and sources in order to establish facts and reach new conclusions. If all in your paper, in your discussion, all you come to is like Morenike and Co had found this, my study concur with them. Adeshego and Co had found this, but why did you do the study if there are no new conclusions? The Department of Education in US defines it as the creation of new knowledge and all the use of existing knowledge in a new and creative way, so as to generate new concepts, methodology, and understandings. It could be synthesis and analysis of previous research to the extent that they lead to new and creative outcomes. Let's bear that in mind as we go in to talk about creative thinking in research context. Again, just to remind you, people will say there are five research processes, 5 steps. Some people will say 7, some people will say, I've given you 2 here, you can talk about 6, you can talk about 10, but they're essentially talking about the same thing. Let's use this one that I've talked about. Identifying the problem, identifying the purpose, designing a research plan, collecting the data, analyzing data, reporting, and applying the findings. Now, how can we bring creative thinking to this? Let me apologize here. I wanted to put a reference here. I will put that when I'm sending this out, because this is not come directly from me. Now, when you are planning the study, which, for example, you need to identify the problem and define the purpose, you want to evaluate your potential research problem from multiple angles. Is this a quantitative issue? Will a qualitative work with it? Should I do this with a primary data? Will a secondary data work with it? Should I do a mapping of this using Google Mapping to connect this with, I'm doing a study about the use of facilities. Can I map that out on Google? Can I link that with the household? What can I do? Looking at that potential problem from multiple angles. Look beyond the typical ways that research problems are identified to ask yourself, are there other ways? Look at the scholarly literature and say, what do they know? But where are the things that are not known? What are the things that they do not know? What method have they used? Are there new ways to use those methods to engage in that same answer? A couple of weeks ago, I think that was 28th of December, I was doing a lecture on the platform of West African College of Physicians. And I was showing how understanding the unique approaches we use in abortion research can be applied to many other kinds of sensitive research. For example, if you are doing a study among young people with drugs or the sex, we know that these are sensitive materials, but there are creative ways we can go about it. So if we analyze scholarly literature and we do that broadly, we can get new ways that are being used in different ways, in different studies, and we can apply them to our work. We can evaluate our perspective from other school of thoughts, and like I said earlier on, bringing other discipline to it. And you can draw ideas from later contemporary writings, media, social media, to learn from viewpoints outside of academia. A couple of years ago, I went to examine a student in Ghana who was doing his master's in public health. Interestingly, this guy did not talk to any human being, did not collect data from any facility. You know what he did? He was looking at abortion issues and perspective. He sat down with newspaper, took all the major newspaper in Ghana, and analyzed how the topic was covered, what kind of impressions were given. And I was so excited, I was so blessed reading his work. That is stepping out of the realm that is usual to look at contemporary issues. A couple of last week was it upper week, a young man came to me. He's doing his PhD in English, and I was looking at his CV, and I was looking at his thesis title. Do you know what this guy was analyzing? He was analyzing, the title of his master's was Autogen, looking at the political philosophy and use of language in the campaign it had happened in Kwara State, how Saraki was dethroned. I was like, wow. You know, I was so intrigued. His PhD is looking at the preaching and prosperity of preachers, using how they use word. And so there are many creative ways. Let's step out of our little boundaries to big up areas, including the social media. We can use them to analyze work. All right. If we go to the next process of designing the study, and we think about our research ideas, of course, I've thrown idea up and down, left and right, You should be able to clearly articulate your idea. And then look at theoretical and methodological options. Don't be limited by the well-known options. I was making a presentation yesterday, and I remember telling the guys, these are all fellows of calculation of surgeons and physicians. And I said, I was at a meeting with a colleague of mine. We were doing a work together. This guy is a qualitative. And she began to talk about some methods. Believe me, I have never in my life had those methods. So if you think you know, the truth is that you still need to know more. So there are several theoretical and methodological options you can explore. You can also invent theories and methodologies. You can look at existing theories and bring two theories together, bring out a theory. You can adapt theories from other cultures or other disciplines. You can evaluate data from different kinds of populations and using different options. You can develop studies or adapt them, adapt instruments in creative mindset. I'm going to give some examples. One of the examples I wanted to give, which I ended up not being able to put, is about when you do something that's called photo voice. It's about using camera to capture information, and you can publish from it. In one of the works we did, we are doing a work with young people and working around gender attitudes in school and how they inform reproductive health beliefs and practices. We want young people to have a voice. And what we did is we train young people and we gave them cameras to go around their school over several days and pick ideas that relate to gender issues that they would like to see addressed. They took the pictures. The students and young people, after analyze, this was 10 to 14-year-old people, after analyze the picture to say, this is why we took this picture, this is what it means, this is what we want to see change. And when it came to presentation, this was the work we did. It was a 4-year work, a longitudinal work in Osun State, funded by IDRC. When it was time to present it to stakeholders, I didn't present. My team member didn't present. These young people presented to the Osun State Director of Schools, Osun State Director General of Education, all that. So there are many ways we can adapt instruments with creative mindset. We can also consider visual creative methods for collecting data, and I'll just share one example. All right, when it comes to conducting the study, we can look at different ways to evaluate our study progress so that we can adjust as we go. Instead of just sticking to, this is the way we design it, this is the way it must go, this is the way it will happen. No. We can also think about creative ways to engage stakeholders, to engage participants, and develop rapport so I can collect rich data. And finally, you can look at you can analyze and make sense of the data. Critically analyze it, look at trends and visualize the data. I said finally, sorry. And then disseminating results. You can also look at different ways of disseminating results. My time is going very fast. And different ways for impact. Let me illustrate the real life example with 2 studies. The real studies that I have been involved in to show how we truly can apply creative mindset to our work in research realm. A couple of years back, Gomaka Institute wanted to work in a couple of countries. There were 3 countries: Mexico, Nigeria, and one other country. And the issue is, we're looking at misoprostol. Like, I'm sure many of you might know about misoprostol. Misoprostol is what you can call an abortion drug. It's a drug can use to induce abortion in the early stage of abortion. And indeed, WHO says it can be used safely early in pregnancy. But we want to know, how are people using it? Are people getting? Are they having side effects? And if the pregnancy fail, what they do? So they took 3 countries where the laws are restrictive, including Nigeria. So we are in a dilemma. Some of the dilemma, let me highlight 2. How do you get the truth about who buy misoprostol? Because you know that if you go and ask people, even if they are buying, if they just bought it and they turn back and they are putting in their pocket, I said, did you buy? I said, no, I didn't buy misoprostol. How can you follow them up to know if they use it well, and if they have complications, or what happened to the pregnancy? Are you going to follow them to their house? It's kind of the dilemma we are faced with. how do you get enough people that will generate good research findings? But through a lot of deliberations, through allowing our mind to roam freely and sometimes stupidly, we got solutions to that, to do that study. Let me show you some of the things we did. So in that study, our aim was to assess the safety and effectiveness of self-managed mesopostal abortion. We choose Lagos because we know that Lagos is a place where nobody will come and stone us if they hear we are doing mesopostal study. And we particularly choose areas very close to higher institutions. Isono, where there's Lagos State Polytechnic there. Ikorodu, there's Lagos State University of Ikeja, That answered the question of, can we get enough people? Because we wanted young people too. And we said, okay, how do we get the truth? Then what we do is, we work with those who are selling the drug. So when somebody comes to buy the drug, he had bought the drug. There is no question about it. What you don't know is, does he want to use this for himself or buy for his sister? So we need to be able to interview them when the drug was bought. We need to be able to interview them in about 1 week to know how many of them had used the drug really. Because somebody can buy the drug and when he gets home, his friend tell him, if you use that drug, you may die, and you just go and keep it. And if you had used it, did it work? Did it have complications? What kind of complications? So we said what we are going to do is we are going to interview people 3 times. But how do we interview people? That are you going to call their number and say, madam, you bought misoprostol last time, and you are sure the person will not cut off the phone on you? You know what we did? We bought phone for every respondent, and we bought a SIM card. So when you come to buy this drug in the chemist, they will introduce this study to you, and say, if you want to participate, here is a phone and a SIM card. Why did we do that? Number one, we don't want to call their regular phones, because when we did our pilot, we are people that talk to us first. When we call them next time, as soon as they hear misopostal, they just cut off the phone. So we have to give them a different phone, and we wanted to assure them of confidentiality. So we told them we bought a SIM card. We were working with Airtel. We say, look, here is this SIM card. After this interview, 3 weeks time, you can throw it to the latrine if you like. So they know we cannot trace them forever if they choose to throw it away. That was how we were able to do this study. And people reported to us their experience, and that became the first prospective study anywhere in Sub-Saharan Africa to have examined the experience and health outcome of women who are obtaining misoprostol for abortion case. My time is going. Let me move to the second. And one of the things I talk to you about is, how do you disseminate information? Let me show you one of the ways we disseminated this. I hope this will show. We actually created a story out of it. We created a story based on that story. We call it Jojolo story. I hope you can see it from your end. Okay. So we created a story from it, a video that people can watch. All right, I'm going to stop this because of our time. Let me go back. So we then used films. We created video films. We created all kinds of materials to use this to sensitize young people against the dangers, to also sensitize people about what works and what does not work. So we can also be creative about how, of course, we publish this in international journal. BMJ, we presented as John at conferences. We did national dissemination, where we did facts and other things. So we can think creatively across all the steps in research process. Let me go to my second example. In my second example, this was a study done by my organization, Academy for Health Development, and in conjunction with IPAS. We work on different things in my organization, because if I present this now, that has to do with sexual violence and abortion. Somebody will say they are always working on abortion. No, we work on different issues. I just pick very sensitive subjects that need the creativity of a researcher to answer the question. So in this study, we want to do a national study. In fact, we did this study in 13 states, 12 states for an FCT. When we wanted to know about sexual violence, but not sexual violence, we know there are enough papers of sexual violence. We wanted to know about sexual violence in which pregnancy occurred. And did the women keep the pregnancy? Did they terminate it? At what stage? Did they? No. So we wanted to find out those women who really had this issue. So our objective included to determine the incidence of sexual violence resulting in pregnancy, the pregnancy intention, and the outcomes among survivors. So what's the dilemma? How do we locate survivors of sexual violence in large enough numbers? And using a scientifically sampling method and study approach that will allow us to generalize nationally and be able to publish this anywhere we want in the world. How did you go about solving this dilemma? We recognize that sexual violence survivors are hard to reach populations, but there can be some, and they don't have very firm linkage. It's not as if they're like students who are in the same school. They are not like villagers, pregnant women using the same health centers. We know there are some loose linkages. So we have to look at the literature widely. We hit on something that is called the starfish sampling technique, and we adapt it within the Nigerian context. So what we do, we went to the centers where women who have sexual violence will be housed temporarily. They are called shelters. So we went to some of the shelters in each of those states, and from the shelter we will meet some women, and we'll meet people who are social workers. I will ask them for, do you know other people? But it's not the usual way of doing to do snowball, because snowball is like, oh, just pick one person. Do you know that person? If you pick one girl and say, do you know that person? She may not know, because one, she herself may not be a survivor of sexual violence. But because there is a shelter where all of them come in, but they come in and go out at different times, the center becomes the center of the starfish approach. So we use the starfish approach and took some other creative approach in analyzing the data. We also our sample size also took cognizance of the creative thing we are doing, so that we can just not calculate a sample size in the directory. Our sample size calculation needs to take cognizance that survivors that had pregnancy are a subset of survivors, and all of that we needed to do in our sampling. And we disseminated this in very many ways. We designed fact sheets and a few other ways. So it is possible to bring creative thinking to the realm of research. Let me end this lecture. How can you begin to engage in creative thinking? Here I'm talking about engaging in the practice of creative thinking. I've said some of this, but I just want to grab them up this way. Number one, brainstorm ideas on a large piece of paper. Don't edit it, just brainstorm them. Just write as they come to your mind. Or if you have a phone that has writing facilities or iPad, just keep on writing as they come to you. Don't edit. Don't say this is stupid, this is crazy, this is idiotic. No. Point them out and then allow yourself to then begin to go over there. Remember, one of the things I said about characteristics of creative thinking is that you don't discard the idea very early. Allow yourself to play with an idea while you go for a walk. You remember I've talked about this idea. I will just give yourself time. Wander around. Draw or paint theory on paper. You are thinking about theory, how they connect. Don't just think in your head. Write on paper. Just draw and see how they connect. You can be amazed how something will jump at you. Ask the same question severally. In fact, in one of the researchers says, ask a question at least 20 times about the issue, and make sure you get different answers different times. And then that way you begin to generate very many ideas, and that gives you the opportunity to sift them and then to identify those that might work well. Combine some of the features of different objects or ideas to see if you can create something more. Take two theories, take two research philosophies, combine them, play with them, and see something new can come out of it. Change your routine, do something different. Take a walk, particularly if you live in Ife, you live on campus. Take a walk around some of the botanical was Spotify. I never knew about Spotify. Something was happening, and I was going through some some emotional moment, and somehow I get to know Spotify. Believe me, I
No audio on my end.
I'll try to get him. I think we lost him. Yeah,
Okay.
so over to you. Yes, I'll go and get him.
Okay, thank you very much. Please, as soon as it comes back, let me know. Let's just try to play with what we have heard so far. I mean, this is fantastic. This is excellent. I've had so many wonderful messages in the chat that I'm sure our speaker can get to later on. So as we try to adapt this moment to allow our mind to wander, I just like to quickly go over a few of what we have heard. And as soon as he comes back, I will step aside for him to just wrap up his presentation. I believe we have all listened attentively. We've participated very actively. Professor Fatuga has tried to help us to put our creative thinking into action. It's fantastic. For example, he gave us very wonderful fundamentals, foundations, and then he took us to core. That is the application, and then how to be creative within the context of a research world and research community. He assisted us to see how we can become more creative if we have been before, and if we think we have not been, how to begin. I mean, it's a wonderful journey. And he told us how to generate several ideas, how to manipulate them in order to be able to produce a proper solution to a given problem. I have two questions in the chat room, and I want to say if you have other questions, please begin to drop them in the chat so that when he comes back, we'll be able to pick them quickly. He defined it for us as ability to generate ideas, and we all generate ideas. We generate ideas about different kind of things. I think what he has bathed our mind with this afternoon is to begin to look at ideas and not be stupid or useless or anything, but to bring out the relevancies out of what we even consider irrelevant. He helped us to see that there's no idea that is not useful. We should not say, oh, this is not a great idea and just throw it away. No, but rather open our eyes to see how we can connect those ideas to bring out uniqueness in them, to be able to bring out what others cannot see. And it's like the more you look for some people, the less they see. But for us, having learned this, having listened to this presentation, we're going to open our eyes more to opportunities, to ideas, and not just that, but we'll be able to go a step further to see how we can bring out the uniqueness of whatever information, whatever ideas we have, like we have had this afternoon. What are we going to do with this information that we have just received? I saw that many people are requesting for the slides and the recordings and so on. And Professor, our main Professor Morenike Falayon has given to us a link on the chat. If you have been following, you can please just visit the chat and then get yourself linked to that and be able to get information. For me personally, I will soon be asking us, if he has not yet returned, what exactly have we learned from this presentation to put in the chat. But for me, I've learned quite a number of things. For example, the book by Malcolm that he talked to us titled Outliers. I mean, I've heard that very often, but I didn't know where it came from. So that was a fantastic thing for me. To be able to be creative by brainstorming. And two ideas occurred to me. One is not just thinking about the large number of things, but being able to think about the quantum in such a way as to be able to generate what you are looking for. So don't just see what every other person is saying. look for outliers, look for things that any other person, ordinary mind will just see and throw away. No, do business with it. Think more about it. And I wrote something that I don't know whether you caught it in his presentation. He said people who are great, take for example, popular physicians. Okay, it's back. Good.
Are you there? Okay.
Stop. I will just stop and allow him to continue.
Yes, Toby, you need to unmute him. He can't speak. Toby, are you there? Please unmute him.
Yes, yes. Okay, I'll do
Please
that.
Unmute Professor Fatusi, yes. He's
Thank
back,
you.
but he can't speak.
Let me thank the chair, very erudite professor of nursing, Professor Adejumo. I apologize, I didn't acknowledge you in my jumping on. He's also one great colleague I've got to know over the years. Thank you very much, ma, for the summary. I had been back, but just actually almost for a while. Please permit me before I answer the questions to just show my last 2 slides that I think will summarize things I want to think about. We can think of the brain as a muscle. To run a couple of kilometers, people must practice. By exercising regularly, our muscles and condition become strong enough to run a
You have
longer
to show the
distance.
slides, sir. We are not seeing your slides, sir.
Oh, wow. Okay. Sorry. Oh my God. Okay. You can see my slide now.
Yes.
It's coming up, sir.
So that, just to summarize, that you can think of your brain as a muscle. The more you use your muscle, the more you are able to do more things. You can run more kilometers. You can move from 1 to 2. The same is true about our brain. Regularly exercising our brain enable us to improve our capacity for creative thinking and to keep our brain in shape. I'm back. I had Professor Adejumo was talking about outliers. Thank you, ma. I want to end up with 2 other quotations from outliers. Like I told you, it's one of the book is a book I really enjoy. He said, people aren't born geniuses. They get there through effort. So, in other words, you and I can become more creative through efforts. Practice isn't the thing you do once you are good. It is the thing you do that makes you good. So, each of us must practice, practice, and practice. I want to thank you very much for being part of the presentation, and I apologize that my internet failed for a few minutes. So, let me take the questions now, ma. Madam Chair, I hope I can take the question now, ma. I'm trying to look for the questions.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
All right.
The first one says, how do you handle a situation? From Madam Adewonyi Olayinka Benedicta. How do you handle a situation where a person has gone through some traumatic situations and the person decided not to think or remember anything because of the pains of previous years?
Okay. I think that's simple and straightforward. Please see a therapist. That's the simple, straightforward answer. Because if you get arrested by your past, you are not going to step into your future. Traumatic events can be can be great dangers to our productivity. Post-traumatic syndromes we all know about. So my advice is please see a therapist as soon as possible and let them help you. You must be determined to put your past to the past so that you can face your future the way it needs to be faced. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. The second question is from Madam Doshima. Is that what makes it a starfish approach, please? Starfish approach.
Madam Doshima, I will explain a bit, but I will ask you to read it all. And if you want, I can send you literature on it. So the starfish approach actually started from the work that has been done among people living with HIV, particularly key population. You know, in a starfish approach, there is a center or a nucleus, you know, and that nucleus radiates outward. So starfish is like looking at the stars and formations. So you have a nucleus, and from the nucleus, there is branching out. So in what I've described to you, The nucleus of that study, unlike when you do just snowball, when you meet some people and then go on. No. In Starfish approach, the nucleus for us was the shelters. So we went to the shelters where survivors are brought in to stay for a number of days, connected with them, and then use that connection, and we begin to widen that connection. It almost looks like snowball, but a snowball with a center, a nucleus, and that's what makes this a Starfish approach. When you use a Starfish approach, by the way, there are different ways to analyze it that are also very specific to the Starfish approach. But like I said, if you're interested, I can send it to you. I didn't know about this myself until this study came up, and we were asking ourselves, how do we get around this dilemma? What do we solve it? Have other people gotten this kind of dilemma before? And so we started searching, and then we started looking at our environment. Where do we go? Do we go to the police? Do we go to the media house? Do we go to the Ministry of Women Affairs? Do we go to... And we started looking at all of those approaches and asking ourselves, where would this work best? Until at the end of the day, looking at literature, getting this approach, like we need a nucleus. The shelter becomes our nucleus. If there are no shelter, for example, we will use another place. But it came from that idea of just being open, just searching, just wondering, just collaborating, just communicating, not allowing ourselves to be bumped in by situation. That's what makes a Starfish approach. Like I said, I will need to share literature with you if you so desire. Thank you.
Thank you. One more question stroke comment, but let me just read it from Mr. or Dr. Ayo Nunga. He says some disciplines are too straight-jacketed to the extent that you are never trained to think differently from the norm. Medical training, the greatest culprit. Can critical thinking be part of the basic training from beginning? Can it be part of science curriculum? Over to you, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. In a paper published by Ritas et al., they claim, in fact, not they claim, they said that school is the greatest killer of creative thinking. They said because school and learning in schools forces us to think in a rote way, in a routine way. We learn, some of you may remember your primary school, secondary, I don't know, your primary school, I don't know where you went to school. My teacher in the class would come and say, 2 times 2. If you don't answer 4 immediately, there is a ruler that knocks on your head. So you develop the idea of cram everything, 3 times 3. Before you finish answering, you have now. But it has robbed us of opportunities to be able to make contribution in the scientific world, even to research world in a broader way. And that's why each of us have a responsibility to say what can be different and how can we make it different. I totally agree with you, Professor Ayonunga, that medical training is particularly a culprit. It forces people to stop thinking. I tell people all the time that if you are a great thinker, look for something else to do with your life. But that said, each of us and many of us here are educators. And we can start in our various groups. I just give you a simple example. If you ask a young person and say, what ways can you get to 6? He can think about 24 ways. Many ways. 7 minus 1 is 8 minus 2. We can begin even with our young people that we work with. In churches, in mosques, to begin to ask them to, so that's the way we must start. And in our medical school, in our nursing schools, and each of other schools that we have, each of us can become, in every school we have, each of us can become an apostle and introduce to our class. And you'll be amazed how brilliant our young people are and how creative their minds are if we only allow them to think and we're able to support them. So I agree with you. Let's start this, not in our university. Let's go back to our primary school, push it down to our secondary school, and university can then top it up as we go along the line. Thank you.
Thank you. One more question here. Now that we have all become apostles, this is from Apostle Adele. He said, what is the difference between creative and critical thinking? I know you answered it, but maybe...
I answered this, but I don't want to give a lecture on it, but I intentionally brought that on. So the two, like I said, should be used complementarily when we are when we are doing research. When you're thinking about critical thinking talks about making judgments. It means about not just being swayed by opinion. It means that you are subjecting that issue, that so-called fact, to examination that is deeper, so that you are coming up with a conclusion that is real and above and beyond the surface level. On the other hand, creative thinking is about allowing your mind to roam, to explore and bring ideas together. And this is where they play well together. If you start with a creative thinking and generate a lot of ideas, you can then bring critical thinking to the area of idea selection and idea finalization. So the two of them work together very well, particularly in the research realm. I hope that clarifies it without going too deep into them. Each of them is a lecture on its own.
Thank you. There's 3-in-1 or 2-in-1 question here. But before then, there are 2 wonderful quotes in the chat. Please read it to buttress that last question and answer. This is from Apostle Ishiaku Abdullahi. I want to compliment the effort of the presenter for the insightful presentation. My questions are as follows. 1, what informed the decision of using starfish sampling technique for data collection? And 2, I need more explanation as to why survivors of sexual violence are hard to reach population. And finally, can I have the presentation if it can be made available to us? Thank you.
Right. Thank you. I can see my friend and brother, Professor Sharif Bello, all the way from Sokoto, put up his hand, by the way. The dean of the medical school there. But let me quickly answer the question that you have raised, ma. Let me challenge you to read papers on it. I will send you paper, like I said, but I will explain quickly. If you go out, even in our university, if you go to your college, if there are possibly there are professors who have been abused by their husbands. How many of them will say, yes, I'm being abused? Or you go to a church, some of those people that are your church leaders have been abused. But how many of them will shout out? That's what makes them difficult to reach people, because many people will not regularly agree. They will not say it out, particularly in our environment. It's like asking young people in church, how many of you are sexually active? Or in the mosque, how many of you are? So those are sensitive subjects and they are difficult. So that's what makes them difficult to reach people. And you cannot go to the community and just do a survey. You can, but you get lies. Half of the studies we do, some people say they are. The truth is that when you compare those studies using other methods that are for sensitive questions, for example, if you use list approach, you find that the findings that you get between your regular community survey and using techniques that are specifically designed for secretive questions, the answers will be different. I can tell you, give you an example you can even read in Nigeria. I went along and a team, I've done a number of work around abortion. Then they use different methods. And you find the estimate, when they ask people, did you have abortion? The figure became less than when they say, as your friend had abortion. So there are different ways, and when you are working with such vulnerable communities, and when you are working with communities that will not easily agree to tell you the truth, you have to be specific in your approach. You have to be creative. Otherwise, you just do the study, you publish the finding, but the truth is that finding is not true about the situation. Does that make sense? I hope I've answered that. But
Thank you.
I've answered the 2 questions.
Prof, as your questions, do you have answers, satisfied answers now? I think it's muted.
Okay. Otherwise, okay. I can come and do a lecture on starfish approach one day. I just mean to illustrate creative thinking. That's all.
It was awesome, and we enjoyed every bit of it. And we are open to new ideas. We are open to learn more and more. Thank you so much. I'm afraid because of time, I'm just going to take the very last question. and then we're going to freeze these. Hopefully, in the next nearer future or foreseeable future, we'll come back again, because I think there's going to be more that will come out of this very fantastic opportunity that we have been given. Thank you very much. And so the last question says, yes, all of these are wonderful things. And my question is, how do I free myself from being choked? I don't know if Professor Shuabu Bello is still on and would like to say something before our speaker answers. Yes, that's why I'm asking. Prof, are you still there? Yes. Thank you. Back to you.
All right, thank you. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to have attended this exciting lecture by my classmate. Just to emphasize that medicine necessarily has to be in straitjacket, because what we use in medicine is group intelligence rather than individual intelligence, which is developed into guidelines and protocols. And to go out of it necessarily becomes dangerous. Nevertheless, as Professor Fatusi said, it doesn't mean there are no areas where you could be creative. Common areas are where you meet unmet challenges or unusual challenges that is not in any book, it's not part of what you have learned a lot. But we still go ahead and make creative things, even in what we have learned, only that the process of introducing it is slower and more cautious, just because we deal with life and necessarily has to be use what we know works rather than what you think may work in certain situations. I think that summarizes it, but you can see the example of Professor Fatusi's work. They had unusual challenges and they solved it. And that is the real thing about critical thinking. If there's an argument whether it's innate or whether it's something you can learn, but overall everybody agree you can learn it, although some people will do better in every field, just like we know. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Good to see you. So the last question, how do I free myself? I suppose that person is probably a lecturer or a junior lecturer, by the way, that has too much on his head. And believe me, almost all of us have. I'm sure that a presentation will tell you how much she has on her head. You will pity her. Or if I tell you how much I have on my head, But we have time for everything we prioritize. It's about priority. I learned a lesson a few years ago from a colleague, Professor Emushoi, who was the director of the Bill and Melinda Gates Center for Population and Reproductive Health in Johns Hopkins School of Public Health. We used to work together. And I was spending a time in Johns Hopkins. And on Thursday morning, I just went to see her. I noticed he wasn't here. So on Friday, I asked her, I said, Amy, you were not around yesterday. He said, no, Shegun, I don't come on Thursdays. He said, I keep my Thursday in the morning to do my own research work and my thinking. I'll mention another person. I met a neurosurgeon here, Professor Komalafe. We were together in church on Sunday, and he asked me something about, am I arrested? And I'm like, you know what? And he told me, he said, this particular period, I reserve it for myself. All of us need to reserve period for ourselves. If you call me at 5:30, I won't pick your call. If you call me at 6:30, I won't pick your call. Because one of the things I'm learning to do is keep my phone away so that I can have some time for myself to think, to start my day reflecting about life, bringing all that. So we all have a choice to allow people to crowd our life with everything. But we all have a responsibility to ourselves to say, I will create a time for myself. It may be difficult as a young person, as a younger colleague, but I'm sure you can negotiate it. If you are able to do your work, even 2 hours, you can find for yourself. And I'm not just talking about finding for yourself for work. Finding for yourself to reflect. Finding for yourself to rest. Finding yourself to chart your future. So, sir, ma, I don't know who you are. If you are determined to, you can free some time for yourself. I think that's where I will stop. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you so very much. I'm sure we are all wise in spending this evening like this. And I want to thank you so much, Sir Prof, a great speaker, for wonderful exposition. We are really so grateful. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for the knowledge impartation. We are grateful. Let me thank Professor Shoab, who has joined us. And thank you so much also for creating this wonderful time. And I want to thank our, how do I call her now? Professor Morenike Afolayan. Thank you so much for giving us all this opportunity. We are so grateful. We appreciate it a great deal. And in wrapping up, I just want to say that every one of us, we have learned. We need to learn some things, and we have to sit down. We have just heard that we should set our priority right. We can see from the presentation that the presenter, as a vice chancellor, has created time to read books, and that has been demonstrated here. So we need to go and read great books and rub mind with great people. We've seen that he's very open, is very reflective, is very creative. He's not just teaching us theoretically. By telling us what he has learned from other people, he has told us things that he has never learned before, and he just learned them in the course of interacting with people. So we need to do that. We should learn to control social media and not let social media control us. It's no longer the young people alone, but everyone. And finally, we should learn to create a time to breathe and use that time, for those things that are of priority to every one of us. At this juncture, I want to say a very big thank you to everyone who has made this evening a success. Thanks. And go ahead and please continue and begin, depending on where you are, to be creative wherever you find yourself and whatsoever is of interest to you. Thanks. Over from.
Thank you very much, ma. Thank you, Professor Morenike. Thank you, everyone. Good night or good evening.